It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by Agile Dad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. If you recall last week, I did a LinkedIn post regarding Agile meetings, and I was talking about inviting the rats and making sure that we had things down to help our meetings be even better. Well, I got a lot of traffic and a lot of inquiries regarding this. So I appreciate all the emails and all the inquiries. But I wanted to touch base on one thing that I think would really help. Someone asked me point blank, they said, could you give us just like a top 10 list, a rundown of the things that we need to do to make sure that our meetings are better than they are now? Because sometimes we can't bite the bullet and do everything all at once. Give us a list of a few things that we can consider, and we'll see if we could take it from there, which I thought was a very good idea. So I broke it down into a couple of sections. I broke it down into things you should do before the meeting, obviously, things you should do during the meeting, and things that you need to do after the meeting. And this is in the same vein as the Agile Meetings playbook that I put out there. So I thought that this would be a good addendum, if you will, to that playbook. And who knows, I may even end up writing this out because I think it's got some good value. So I hope you enjoy. So before the meeting, the first thing you can do, the first thing you can look at is making sure that your meeting has a goal or purpose. You need to ask yourself, why are we having this meeting at all? Right? I've been to enough meetings where I've discovered that the people in the meeting have no idea why they're having the meeting. I think that it's so important, right, to understand why we're having a meeting and to make sure before the meeting starts that we share information so that we have context, or if we need clarification, we know and we're prepared if there's any implications that'll come out of this. If the participants need to have anything prepared beforehand, these are all valid things that need to be done before the meeting starts. We also need to know what we're going to discuss. Do we have a clear agenda? Do we know whether we're answering a question regarding strategy, whether we're setting a goal? What is the objective? And then ask ourselves, what is the path to get the decision made? Is it going to be discussions? Are we trying to figure out the best way to accomplish a plan? Are we brainstorming? And then we also need to make sure that we determine who's responsible or accountable for what's happening and what we're trying to do. In other words, if you understand the intent, it's going to drive you a lot further. That was all number one. So number two, we need to make sure we invite the right people. Now, I can tell you right now, large meetings are costly and incredibly inefficient for the most part. So unless it's a rapid release planning, of course. But what I've discovered is that many meetings, you have people there that you don't even know, or people that feel like they need to be there and they don't really need to be there. One of the tools that I saw used at one of my clients, and I thought this was genius, it was a timer, but I believe since this timer was released that it's gone. But the timer that was released, it was incredible. It allowed you to put in the number of people with each job title. So you'd have to map how many of these do you have? How many senior architects do you have? How many directors? How many VPs? And you literally would map these things out, right? How many developers? And what would happen is you put in your zip code and it would pull from one of the employment sites a salary calculator, a salary finder, and it would get the average salary for each person in the room. And then when you press begin meeting, what was amazing, it was enthralling to watch, it counted up in dollars the cost of the meeting. Could you imagine having your mind blown when you're sitting in a meeting that costs $310,000 and you realize just how you're not getting value out of it? I think there's just so much value in really, really honing in on who needs to be there. And it's not saying don't invite people for the sake of you don't want them there, but uninviting people for the sake of allowing them to get their work done, that's a good practice. Ask yourself, would this decision or discussion be more effective with fewer participants? Who on the invite list can just read a meeting notes or a meeting minutes if we have one instead of being present? All but the daily stand-up, that's applicable, right? Or if you're trying to seek a decision in a meeting, do you have the decision-making authority as a mandatory person on the meeting participants list? If not, you'll be booking a second meeting to figure that out. Or if you're trying to make sure work gets broken down and gets delegated, you need to ask yourself, are the contributors there to give their fair assessment? And I think that it's just making sure you have right representation. Yes? Okay. Number 3, make sure you have a clear agenda. Now, this doesn't need to be a textbook. It doesn't need to be long-winded, but you want to make sure that you're putting everything into context about what you're trying to do, that you're specifying what the goal is. Is our goal to inform, to debate, to decide, to brainstorm? And then you need to make sure that you break down that allocation so that everyone understands that we are going to get out on time and that we're not going to be there forever. Coming in at number 4, make sure that you have all of the hard logistics for the meeting plan. So whether that's making sure you have audio and video tooling present that works, making sure you have the right Zoom link set up or Teams or whatever you're using, right? Make sure that you have everything set up in such a way that you can, confirm that everyone's going to be there, make sure everyone got the notice, make sure everyone got the memo for the cover on a TPS report. Yeah. Of course, I'm kidding on the last one, but you get the point. All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about during the meeting. This is one of my favorite things I always talk about. No matter what happens, start your meeting on time. I have been in so many meetings where people say, oh, we're just going to wait for these other 3 people, or thanks for all being on time. And that's disrespectful to everyone who's there, yes? It doesn't matter who's late. Even if it's the vice president or the director, if they're late, they're late. Start the meeting. In fact, what I can tell you, here's a hint. Having served in many of these positions, sometimes I would go to meetings late just to see if they'd wait for me or if they could take care of things themselves. And it helps reinforce that you're enforcing punctuality and that you're teaching people that meetings will begin on time and they will end on time. I think that's important. All right. Number 6, avoid sidebar conversations. So if you're avoiding sidebar conversations, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to get everything figured out, right? Stay on track. Don't let things get derailed. Make sure that you are taking care of your attendees by keeping things in line and making meetings short and sweet. Coming in at number 7, if any decisions are being made outside of the meeting or even in the meeting, we need to clarify how we're reaching a decision. Are we doing a decider vote? Are we doing a fist of 5? Are we tallying up results? Are we having someone outside of the meeting make a decision and carrying it in? I think there's just lots of opportunities for us to figure things out, but sometimes there's just not clarity. So my argument is that we need clarity. We need to understand what's going on and how things are going to be consumed and how we're making decisions. Once again, incredibly important. Coming in at number 8, make sure at the end of the meeting that you roll off with any action items and that you roll off with what the conclusion was for that meeting. I can't tell you the number of meetings I've been to where I attended an entire meeting and walked out and said, now, what am I supposed to do? Or what was that about? We need to make sure that we're not going to be repetitive with everything that we've learned. Coming in at number 9, make sure that everyone understands the timeline that's associated with the action items that were takeaways. I've seen meetings where people have been given an action item and they're like, oh, when do I need to do that by? Or, oh, I think they need that by next year. And it's so amazing to me that people don't put time to, and I'm not a big fan of assigning time to everything, but having a deadline is important, right? Okay, and my last one is regarding after the meeting. So after the meeting, drum roll, I think you already know what I'm going to say. Communicate and follow up. It's important for us to really dig in and make sure that we follow on and make sure that we did what we said we were going to do and that everything is flowing smoothly. And follow-up doesn't necessarily mean another meeting. Follow-up just means making certain that we did our obligations and that other people did their obligations so we can meet an end goal. So there you have it. Quite a list, but I thought that would be helpful because it kind of lays the groundwork. And these are some of those things, once again, I should have called this in the trenches because these are those things that the book doesn't necessarily tell you or remind you to do, but they're things that are incredibly important. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have an idea for an episode, reach out to us, learn more at agiledad.com. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.